Alright, today we're going to learn how to change your lower ball joints on your first gen Tacoma, and that's going to be years 95 through 2004. So, first things first, what you're going to need: a jack stand, a floor jack, some sockets, some miscellaneous tools. You're definitely going to need a mallet or a ball joint separator, one or the other. Ball joint separator is the ideal tool. You're going to need a torque wrench, some pliers, impact, or a breaker bar. And then if you want, some lights, pegs to help with the rusted out cotter pins, and a ratchet and something to work on top. Also going to need some thread locker. Blue or red, it doesn't really matter as long as you have some. I almost forgot to mention, you will also need a new cotter pin for the tie rod end, and you might need one for your lower ball joint if you fucked up and decided to go aftermarket. So get yourself an assortment of cotter pins so you have the right size. First thing you're going to want to do is chalk your wheels. Either wheel chocks or 2x4s work just fine. Then you're going to jack up the car along this frame rail here, anywhere, and then put a jack stand along the frame, under the frame rail, somewhere over here, so that your wheel stays suspended. Then you're going to take your wheel off. That's going to be a 21mm socket and 6 lug nuts. Once you have your wheel off, you're gonna remove this castle nut here. This connects your tie rod end to your ball joint. You have to remove the cotter pin first, but mine's pretty rusted out, so I'm gonna try to remove it with the needle nose pliers first, but if I don't have any luck, I'm just gonna throw the impact on it and just kind of tear the cotter pin away and then dig it out. But this is a 22mm nut. So I ended up just using the impact to take the nut off, and I just used this little pick that has the end broken off of it to push the cotter pin out. As you can see, it's already starting to come out. I'm just gonna give it a couple of whacks and then you can move on. Next step, you're going to want to use a ball joint remover, if you have one big enough, to slide that around the boot there, and then you put this end over the top of it, and then you tighten that, and it'll push that down and pop it out. However, this one doesn't fit on my tie rod end. To get it on, I'd have to damage the boot, and I do not want to damage the boot. So what you're gonna have to do instead is take a mallet and whack this point right here. And usually after about 20 good whacks, this will drop down. And make sure you keep this castle nut started off on this right here so that you don't damage the threads. As you can see, with very little effort, I was able to break that seal there, and now you can remove your castle nut and take your tie rod end out, and you can move on to, if you can see past a little rust, you can move on to that castle nut at the lower end of the ball joint. If you can get a pair of vice grips on there, what you want to do is lock it in and then use leverage to pull it out. See, we're almost there. Once you get your cotter pin out, you can move on to these 4, and those are 14mm. So now that you've got those 4 out, your entire hub assembly should be able to separate from the lower ball joint, and now you can move on to removing this. That's a 24 ft-millimeter castle nut, and then I'll show you how to pop the ball joint out of the control arm here. So what you want to do with the ball joint separator is you want to unscrew this all the way so that this can close, and then you want to, this is the boot for the ball joint. You can either destroy the boot and go over it, which it doesn't matter because we're replacing this, or you can try and pry the boot out of the way. I know that my other one, I was able to easily pry the boot out of the way. This one, the boot did not want to pry away, so I had to just go right on over it. So then what you're gonna do is you're gonna hit this with the impact, and it's gonna pop that ball joint right through, and you'll be able to remove that. And now I'm gonna demonstrate that for you. See? That's that pop. When you hear that pop, you know you're good to go. Okay, so now you should be able to just pull your ball joint right out. Okay. And compare your parts. Always compare your parts. You gotta buy the new one from Toyota directly. The aftermarket ones are not good enough, and these are already bad enough. These go bad and can cause a pretty catastrophic failure. The kit also comes with a new cotter pin and castle nut. Okay, so now you just go in reverse order. You're gonna stick that bolt back into the control arm, and these guides will help you line up back into the hub assembly. So what I did was I started off that castle nut on the bottom, and then I had to jack up the control arm a little bit just so that those bolt holes would line up. So I was able to start that one, and now you should have no problem moving on to the other three. Now once you get some of them started off, I would say you're safe to put the thread locker on now. So you just put a little bit on the tip, because the only part that's threaded is this part right here. It's a very short section, so you don't need thread locker on just the tip, but thread locker on all 4 of those bolts. So once you've got them all in there with thread locker on there, you're gonna torque it down to 59 foot-pounds. Torque all 4 of them down. Once you've got those torqued down, now you can torque this one down to 103 foot-pounds, and then don't forget your cotter pin. When you've torqued it down, if the hole for the cotter pin does not line up with one of the holes for the castle nut, do not untorque it. Don't loosen it. Tighten it a little bit until the hole lines up. By the way, when you put your cotter pin in, it should look something like this. It doesn't have to be exactly like that, but. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna reattach our tie rod end. That's the 22mm castle nut, and that gets torqued down to 67 foot-pounds. And don't forget your cotter pin. Now you can jack your car back up, put your wheel back on, torque your lugs down, and put everything away. Go inside. Have a good night.